This is the Haulin Assets podcast, where we show you how to start and run your own trucking company. Ever wanted to go out on your own? Follow Chris as he goes through the highs and lows of running on his own authority.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Haulin Assets podcast. This is episode number 138, conveniently titled, Many a Mickle Makes a Muckle. So you know exactly what you're getting into, right? It's everybody knows
everybody's heard that phrase before.
I am your host, Craig Hanks. Over there, he's Chris Vernon. How's it going, Chris?
It's going well, except for I was really hoping I could hear you say that in a Scottish accent.
That's not going to happen, even if I wanted it to. Even if I tried, let's just say...
You're not polished up on your Scottish accent.
That's right. That's right.
You're not wearing a kilt. If you were wearing a kilt, If
I was wearing a kilt, this would be a very different podcast. This would be one of those like new metal podcasts. Okay. No, we're not doing that.
You're kind of blushing a little bit. Are you pitching yourself in a kilt? Is that what it is?
No, that's not. I'm not blushing. I got a lot of sun, and I am just redder these days than I have been for a while. Chris, let me do my thing, okay?
Oh, sorry.
I've got my intro.
I'll quit
thing.
Interrupting.
Make sure, everybody, you go to HaulinAssetsLLC.com for full show notes. Make sure you go to MotorCarrierHQ.com, which I am advertising on my hat. MotorCarrierHQ.com, of course, where you get all the tools, the tips, the people who can help you out and make that transition to ownership. And Chris, you're advertising on your hat. Tip your head down a little bit. The Fuel Stream. You can also check out Fuel Stream if you're looking for... I think the phrase I landed on was Fuel Card Plus. It's so much more, right, Chris?
There you go. So much more than a fuel card. I like that.
It's like a fuel... Oh, you should have called it Fuel Stream Plus. Then people would think it's a streaming service, right? Go racing to sign up. Anyway, all right. People can go check all those things out. Chris, before we do our normal topic today, anything you want to talk about? Anything you want to bring up from the last couple weeks?
We finally... have all 11 trucks on the road at the same time with 11 drivers. So that's exciting.
We do now or we did in September?
No, we had a driver just start this week.
Okay.
To the last one to fill up the truck. And it's kind of interesting. This most recent driver is actually somebody that had worked for us previously. And Nate was pointing out to me that over the last year, we've actually had 5 previous drivers ask to come back.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and we've rehired 3 of them. That includes the one that we just rehired, which I think that says a lot about us as a company.
Yeah,
if we have people leaving and then wanting to come back, I think, for the most part, we're doing something right by the drivers, which to me is important. You can never... no relationship's ever perfect, but I think they see that we do everything we can to try to make a good situation for them and a good situation for us.
Yeah. It's called boomeranging. You want to go see if the grass is greener on the other side. You decide it's not, so you come right back, or at least try to. And it's a very common thing. And I don't view it as a mark against somebody who thinks, hey, I think I can get a better situation over there. Hey, good on you. Go for it. But like you say, it says something about the company that enough of them come back or try to come back. That's pretty great.
Yeah. I was pretty excited to hear that.
So 11 trucks on the road starting first week of October. That means I'll be pretty excited to hear about the October numbers in November and see what sort of bump that gets, especially now that fall is kicking into high gear.
I'm excited to see what happens in October. I think September is still going to be pretty tough. I mean, September's over, but right. I haven't done the books yet for September. But I think it's going to be another pretty tough month in September. But a lot of good things happening, and we're going to talk about some of those things today as part of this Many a Mickle Make a Muckle episode. That's kind of a tongue twister. I want to hear you say it like 5 times fast. That's
the thing is, you want that, but nobody else does, Chris. So
yeah, everybody wants to see you sweat and fumble a little bit.
That's not going to happen. I'm a professional talker, Chris. Okay. Now, you actually recently went to Idaho. You went to Idaho.
Nate and I went to Idaho actually just yesterday.
Oh, okay.
Took a road trip. It's for us. When I say up into Idaho, we're talking into like the Blackfoot, Pocatello, Idaho Falls area. And for us, that's a good 2.5 hour drive each way. And then we got up there, we went and visited. We visited with Jake, our dispatcher. We visited with a handful of
I didn't realize
clients.
he was up
Yeah, he's in the Blackfoot area, so
Okay.
he's up that way. And it was a super productive meetings. We're gonna be. We'll talk a little bit about that as part of today's episode. But it was good.
Nice, and it's building those relationships, and maintaining relationships.
Yeah.
It's important.
Yeah,
so.
it's you think about it. I think of it. Well, we'll talk about it later in the episode. We'll go into more detail then.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Well, let's get into these Muckles, making Mickles and all that. What the heck are you talking about, Chris? All right. You sent this over. You said the title of the episode is Many a Mickle Makes a Muckle. And I said, great. What's the episode about? You said, it's about that. And I said, what's that? You said, well, that's what it is. Okay. So enlighten me. What is this phrase?
So many a Mickle make a Muckle is actually an old Scottish phrase that in the United States was popularized way back when in George Washington's time. He actually used the phrase quite a bit. And so that's kind of what popularized it. So it's not something you hear very often anymore. It's not a super common phrase, but there's a lot of wisdom packed into it. So he actually got the phrase wrong. And if he would have said it right, it's a little bit easier to deduce what it means.
Okay.
So it's actually supposed to be many a little makes a muckle.
Okay.
So what it boils down to, what it means is a lot of little things make something big.
Right.
Or in this case, what we're going to talk about today is a lot of little changes can have a big impact. And that's, kind of one of the things that I think it's very, it rings more true in the trucking industry than I think about any other industry out there. If you think about it, money's made by, saving pennies by the mile, lots of miles and makes lots of pennies, and lots of pennies, starts to aggregate into something a lot bigger and a lot better. And so, that's in the trucking industry, that many a mickle make a muckle is so true. And we're going to talk a lot about that today.
Well, this is, what? It's, I make fun of you. I mean, first of all, because that's
you
my
and
job.
A lot of other people.
No, but I make fun of.
That's why my wife likes you.
When you're doing the numbers episodes, and you get to we made $180,417.63, right? It's like you're always going to add the 63 cents on there, but what you're saying is, because those 63 cents matter.
Yeah.
Eventually, especially. Oh, what was there was was the scam in Office Space, right? Do you remember that movie?
Yeah, the movie. Yeah,
the scam in Office Space
was like 1/100 of a penny or something. Yeah,
off of all these transactions, and so they're skimming hundredths of cents, but it adds up, right?
It does. That's a good. Look at you just pulling things out of thin air. That's awesome.
Okay, good. So lots of examples in Haulin Assets. Why don't you give me a few more?
So, well, you think about it. I mean, this is a principle that we've been taught our whole lives. Like when we were little kids, what did just about every kid in the world have? A little piggy bank, right?
Right.
And that's, the principle of piggy bank. You over time, you throw a few pennies in every now and again, and before you know it, it adds up to something bigger. So it's a principle our parents try to teach us with piggy banks and things like that. But I think a lot of times as we get older, we tend to forget about that principle and we don't focus on it as much. And in reality, most of the things in life, those big things, they don't come about by one big event. It's this principle of, a lot of little things turn into something of value, we'll say.
Yeah. So how does that relate then to the state of the company, what you're trying to do now, what you want to do going forward, what you have done in the past? How does this relate then in concrete terms?
Well, you think about it. I mean, if people have been following this podcast and they follow the financial episodes, they know the last, really the last 18 months, especially the last 6 months have been pretty tough financially for Haulin Assets. Yeah. And, Nate and I have been putting a lot of thought into, what can we do to fix this? What can we do to solve this? And the more I think about it is there's really no silver bullet. There's no magic thing that's going to happen that's going to essentially save Haulin Assets and turn things around for us. But what is going to save that is lots of little incremental changes and improvements together are going to make a big difference and get us into making some of those improvements. So after making that big improvement, getting that big gain. Yeah. So, Nate and I over the last several months have been, thinking about, okay, what little tweaks and changes can we make? And we've already started to implement some of those. And then we've got some other ones that we're still in the process of implementing that I think are going to make some changes. And we'll probably, this is a thought process that we've been thinking about quite a bit. And I'm sure there's going to be more that come about. But in this episode, I want to talk a little bit in more detail about those things that we are doing and have been doing for the last month or so, and then also talk about the things that we're going to be starting here in the very, very near future.
So we mentioned the trip to Idaho to visit a few people up there. Is that the sort of thing that you're talking about doing? The what is it? The many littles to make a muckle?
Many littles make a muckle.
One of those littles?
It is one of those littles. Yeah, that's absolutely one of them. So, constant contact with our customers and making sure that we are doing the right thing, and this is a principle you see this throughout all businesses, lots of businesses, this developing relationships and being a resource for essentially your clients. One of the things that really comes to mind is if you think about the pharmacy sales business model. Pharmacy sells, the drug makers, they send people out that go and visit with doctors on a regular basis. So they've got, every salesperson essentially has, I don't know how many, but several dozen doctors that they stay in contact with on a very regular basis. And they'll go constantly visit with them. Typically they take them a treat or a gift, and they just ask questions, make sure they, it just kind of keeps them in the forefront of their mind when the doctor's sitting with a patient prescribing a drug. And the same thing happens with shipping. If you're the one that's constantly, you don't want to overdo it, you don't want to annoy people, but if you're regularly in front of the people that you do business with, when a load comes up, who are they going to think of? It's kind of that whole squeaky wheel principle.
Sure. And like you say, you don't want to overdo it. So there's a line to walk there. But yeah, that's great advice. What other, let me back up and say, you're talking about shippers. You went and met with your dispatcher. Anybody else that you want to kind of keep that contact with?
Well, so we actually, when we were up in Idaho as well, the company that we buy our trailers from, they have a satellite office in Salt Lake, but their main office is actually up in Idaho Falls. So we went and visited with kind of the main guys up there as well. So they're a vendor of ours. We're their customer. But we actually we've been having an issue with some of the trailer tires wearing out sooner and faster than they should. And, talking with them, they went out and met with, or made some phone calls to some of kind of the lead engineers on the trailers, and a few other people got us some other tricks that we want to try. One thing that you're supposed to do at 5,000 miles after the trailer's been on the road that we didn't know about. We're going to start doing that. And so we learned a lot there. We got some warranty issues taken care of, and further cemented that relationship. So all those relationships, not just with customers, but with your vendors, anybody, business, I talk about this, fairly regularly. It's such a relationship driven machine. It's important, and you've got to do that. You've got to network.
With the topic of today being the little things adding up to something bigger, if anybody is ever nervous about reaching out to a vendor, a client, somebody you've got a relationship with, you think, oh gosh, they're busy, I don't want to annoy them, whatever, so people tend to stay way too far back from that line that I was talking about, right? But just think about how good it makes you feel when somebody reaches out. They're not necessarily saying, hey, I need business, I need money, I need to do something with you right now, but maybe they're just reaching out saying, hey, I remember you went on vacation last month. How did it go? Did you have a good time? You're going to love hearing from that person. Is if it's sincere, right? People can see through it if you're really only doing it as an excuse or something. So be sincere, but reach out. People love it. They really enjoy it.
And each one of these meetings only lasted I think our shortest one was probably just under 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Our longest one was maybe 20. Other than Jake, we went to lunch with Jake and met with him longer. But everybody else, it was a fairly quick trip, so we weren't taking up a ton of their time. We took them. Nate this was actually for Driver Appreciation Week, had a bunch of, the trendy, the new, what are they called? The Stanleys. Those Stanley mugs.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, with the straw, that everybody's,
sure.
So many people are carrying around now. We got mugs like that and then had Haulin Assets laser engraved into them. So that not super expensive, like with the mug and the engraving, $20-ish bucks each. And so we gave each one of the people that we work with one of those.
Nice.
So it not a huge thing. And you can just, every time you go, take them some donuts or take them, something, if you know what they like, even better, take them something that they're going to appreciate. And, they'll appreciate that. They'll remember you and build that relationship.
Well, there you go.
And one of the things that we got out of this is one of the shippers that we've been doing work with, we actually found out they actually have some inbound loads from places that we frequent fairly regularly. So, and that's something that, now it sounds like, talking to them, we'll be able to get some of those loads. And that's huge. Like it's, we're getting better at getting good paying freight outbound, but, to be able to find something that's good paying inbound, that's next big step. And so we think we're, hopefully because of these visits, starting that process.
Nice. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, let me switch gears here, Chris. Speaking of this subject, little things make up big things. Fuel, in my mind, is the ultimate version of this, the ultimate example of this, when financially, maybe when we're adding up those cents into dollars, into et cetera, right? Where over the last, frankly, 4.5 years, we've talked a lot about fuel expenses and whatnot. And I know that has been a source of consternation financially for Haulin Assets. Are you working something in as far as bringing fuel costs down by concentrating on those tiny things? Hey, we want to add this piece of aerodynamic equipment on the trucks so that, we spend a couple $100 there, but then it saves 1 cent every so many miles. And, that's going to add up. Does that make sense? Yeah. Anything you're doing with fuel there?
Yeah. So there's several things with fuel. One of the biggest ones of the fuel piece was, Fuel Stream. I'm wearing the Fuel Stream hat today. That fuel card, the routing, and everything that comes along with that is one of those things that saved us actually a fairly significant amount of money, since we started it. So you've got that. We've, being a little bit more diligent on idling, reducing idling. All of our trucks have APUs, but some drivers use them better than others, and just making sure the idle's down so we're not spending as much fuel idling a truck. Those kind of things also, all that adds up. Putting the reefer on continuous or on cycle instead of continuous and on loads that you can, all that stuff adds up.
Nice. Okay. Very good. What other examples do you want to bring up? Little things adding up.
Another little thing that we've recently started is management getting in the truck a little more often. And in the last month in September, Nate, Brad, and I, we all took a load and
in separate trucks.
Same truck, but it was one of the trucks we had sitting.
Oh, right.
So it was actually the same truck.
There weren't the three of you
times,
in
the
truck. That would be, there's your
Team
comedy
plus,
show.
Right? Team plus, 3 of us in one truck at the same time. Yeah.
Okay, so getting out on the road, and I'm sure the other drivers appreciate that as well. They see the hustle.
Yeah.
How can you not appreciate that?
Yeah, we're trying to make a difference. So that's actually one of the things that we're going to continue to do a little more often, whether it is because we're in between drivers on a truck, and it's a way that we can kind of keep the truck going until we get another driver hired. That's one of them. Having a little bit better base of driver leads that we can pick from, so that when we do lose a driver, we've got a handful of people we can call and say, hey, is the timing right for you to come on board with us? that's another thing, just reducing the amount of time that a truck sits without a driver.
Yeah. Very good. What about, tell me about cash flow. We've talked about cash flow, that just a fancy term for money coming in and out of the business. But I know that, we run into this with financials episodes where you'll say, well, doggone it, we dropped off that load on the 1st. And so it hurt last month's revenue, but it'll help this month's revenue. Those sorts of little things. It kind of sounds like just an accounting trick, and it's not actually accomplishing anything. But I think that's wrong. Managing your cash flow is going to be a huge deal. Doing the little things for that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So like lots of little things that our accounts receivable, for instance, being a little bit more diligent on our accounts receivable when we've got an invoice that's outstanding for, 20 days, it's not necessarily ready to get paid yet, but, we talked about this in another episode, starting a process, contacting the broker or shipper, 20 days essentially after the invoice has been sent out, just making sure, hey, do you have everything? When's this going to pay? So that if there is an issue with it, we're on top of it, we're ahead of the game. And that just, that reduces the amount of days from when we get paid. Mm-hmm. If we can get paid on average 2 or 3 days earlier, that helps our cash flow.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Other examples, things you guys are doing.
We talked a little bit about this last month, I think, or one of the last episodes, kind of revisiting how we're buying our tires, where we're getting them from.
Right.
See if we can save a little bit of money there. We've got some things in the works that we think will help a little bit with that. And another thing with the cash flow is we're trying to get more of our vendors. So whether that's our main tire vendor or our the dealership on parts that we have to buy, getting them on 30-day terms, trade credit is what it's called, so that we can be a little bit more deliberate about when we make payments, so that we can if we need to wait 5 days to make a payment on something, we can, so that we can time it with when we've got a little bit more cash coming in, because it comes in tranches. One day you may get, 6 or 7 payments all at once, and then you may go a few days without getting anything.
Right. Okay. All right. What about the loads you're taking? You've mentioned wanting to get a lot more direct shipments. That's great. Okay. So that's one way you can improve the loads. Is there anything else you can do as far as the spot market goes, to analyze better, to work those loads better?
Yeah. So I've done a little bit more, I've done a little bit more load analysis, and I actually anticipate sometime in the next few months doing an episode specific to this, a little bit more load analysis. And this time when I've done it, I've tried to look at loads from the time that a driver leaves the home base, which in most situations, Utah, Southern Idaho, and until they come back to Utah and Southern Idaho. So I'm looking at not just, what are we getting rate-wise on the way out, but what does that whole entire trip look like? And it's kind of helping me see patterns and areas where we can improve. And I really think, and I'm going to get into this in a little bit more detail as one of the other points of what we're going to be doing, is trying to shave off, say in a situation a driver's out for 10 days, if we can make it so the driver's out, is able to complete that same trip in 9 days instead of 10 days. It gets the driver back home sooner. They're running more miles in a day, which they typically want. They're sitting less, and so they're more efficient. They're happier, and then the truck is a little bit more efficient.
Yeah.
And so just trying to squeeze out situations where we can gain a day on a truck. Like a lot of the times, you'll take, for example, Walmart loads are notorious for this. There's usually like
Walmart and notorious often go together. Yeah.
It's very common, and I would say this happens almost all the time on a Walmart load. They've built an extra day into the trip. So if it's like a trip to Georgia that should take 3 days, they're doing it in 4 days. They're making it last 4 days.
Yeah.
And so what ends up happening then is, we have a truck that's occupied for a day longer than it really needs to, if we can shorten that down to 3 days, and that truck more quickly can get, turn around on the next load, and it makes it more productive.
Yeah. All right. What else do we want to talk about? Expenses, generalized?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about expenses. So kind of being a little bit more deliberate with our expenses. We're looking at all our expenses and kind of asking ourselves, okay, do we really need this? Or is there something we can do to reduce the expense?
Do we need this Stanley mug?
Yeah.
With the laser etched?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Fair.
I'm always a little partial towards doing things that, like spending expenses on something that's going to have a return later on down the road.
Right.
So but that's a good point. But really, we're looking at all the expenses. Do we really need to go scale as often as we have been? Do we really need to have as many washouts as we've been having? What can we do to kind of cut down on some of those expenses? And another thing that we're kind of finding right now, we're as a motor carrier, we're having, the times are tough right now, right? And you've also got a lot of companies going out of business. Well, if you think about it, who does this also affect?
Everybody else.
It affects everybody, right. Even not trucking companies, but the companies that service trucking companies. And those companies oftentimes are more willing right now to negotiate on rate. And so, for example, like going back to our ELD provider, okay, can we, we're really starting to shop this. Can you give us a better price? We're kind of looking at everything like that and seeing if we can find ways to negotiate and get better prices with all of our vendors, essentially.
And, kind of similar to the point about it's okay to reach out. They're not going to be annoyed. This is a similar thing where you think, oh gosh, I can't approach somebody and ask for a lower price. Yes, you can.
Yeah.
They get it. They know that everybody else is feeling the pinch. And so if they're your vendor for whatever the product or service is, they know that you're trying to cut expenses, and they could very well end up on the chopping block entirely if they don't play ball. They get it. They're not going to be mad at you about it.
Yeah, they don't want to lose you. Like if you've been a good customer for them, they don't want to lose you, and they've been losing a lot of other customers because people have been going out of business, and so they're going to, if they're a good partner, they're going to try to find a way to save that relationship, and that may mean cutting expenses because we're all, most of the trucking industry and the ancillary companies around trucking, we're all feeling the effects of this market.
Yeah. All right. Well, Chris, I know you've got a huge list. What other little things do you want to talk about?
I think that's all of them, of the things that we're kind of we've already initiated and are at some point or another already doing this. Yeah. So that's all of them. So let's transition.
We're already doing it. Now you want to talk about what you're going to do, what you want to still work into this?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
So, the first one we've already talked a little bit about is really reducing the number of down days on our trucks. So I talked about Walmart. That's one of the things I want to talk a little bit about. Another thing we think we can. So how can we do this with Walmart? And you see bigger companies do this that specifically have a yard. They may have a local truck, but we're going to try to do this in a different form. But either change the pickup date to a day later, or have Nate, Brad, or I go pick up the load the day before the driver wants to actually hit the road. So we've, if our shipper's saying, hey, this is a load that picks up on the 1st, it delivers on the 5th, and we really only need one less day to do that, we'll go pick it up on the 1st, let it sit for a day when the driver wants to leave on the 2nd. And then it's a win-win for everybody, because the driver
gets an extra day off.
It's not really even an extra day off. They get the day off. Their truck is actually getting in, being used a day earlier. They don't have to do anything with it. And then when it's time for them to go, they don't have to go pick up a load. They can just get in the truck and drive. It's one less thing that they have to worry about. Again, it's a win-win. So it's like with the Walmart loads, that they won't let you change the day that you deliver to a day earlier. We'll just pick it up a day later, or we'll pick it up, let it sit for a day, and then have the driver go.
Right.
So you think about it. If the driver comes home, says, hey, I want 4 days off, we'll give them those 4 days off. Their day's going to start, say and we'll go pick up the load on the third day.
You're not waiting for them to finish up their days off before you get the truck going.
Right.
So the idea being what we've talked about a lot before now and in this episode, keep the trucks moving, right? That's what you were kind of talking about at the top of the show is, hey, it's nice to have 11 trucks and all 11 of them are moving as often as possible.
Yep.
Right.
So another way we think we can probably do this on occasion too is fairly often, I would say probably a couple times a month, we'll have one of our Utah-based drivers that, they'll pick up, not even just a Utah-based one. Well, this will work with the Utah-based one, is they'll pick a load up back east that goes to Washington or Oregon. And so what that means typically is they're going to pass through Utah. And so another way we can do this is, when they pass through Utah, time that so that, that's their, like normally we would pick a load that just takes them to Utah.
Right.
But now we thinking, well, why don't we pick a load that takes them to Portland or Oregon or to Oregon or Washington? And when they get to Utah, Nate or I, or maybe Brad, will jump in the truck
and take it the rest of
the way. They'll start their time off. By the time we get back to Utah, they're ready to go again. So that truck's been running that whole time.
Right.
And, that's another way we can, gain a few more days of productivity out of a truck.
There you go. And, it kind of harks back to the early days of Haulin Assets when you were doing a lot of your administrative stuff on the road. Just because management is in a truck doesn't mean you can't get some stuff done anyway, right? So
especially those opportunities where we're picking up a load for somebody, like
right.
It's you're probably driving the truck for 30 minutes waiting for 2 or 3 hours for the truck to get loaded, and at that same time you can be working on a laptop doing stuff
or going on a 4-mile run, right, Chris?
Yeah, we're going on a 4-mile run.
I remember that one.
Yep.
Okay, excellent. So yeah, the goal with all of that again being to keep the trucks moving, right?
Yeah.
So how much more do you think you can do? 5%, 10% by doing this?
My goal is to gain an extra 2 days per truck.
Okay.
A month.
Wow, that's an extra 22 days on the road then.
And roughly an extra $22,000 in revenue.
Right.
And the nice thing about that too is it's not going to require the drivers to spend any more time on the road.
Right.
Like we'll be able to get that extra 22,000 without keeping the drivers away from home any more than they already are.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see. I'm trying to think of anything else. We talked about direct shippers. We talked about inbound loads. Anything else on this list of things you want to get set up?
Let's see. Being a little bit more efficient in the office. We've kind of, TMS is a word or an acronym that's very common in the trucking industry. It's Transportation Management System. We've kind of been using our own kind of homegrown TMS. I think with the size that we are now, we're looking into is it going to make sense for us to invest into a more robust system?
Okay. All right. That kind of reminds me of, I asked you when you wanted to get your own yard for your trucks, and you were saying, 15, 20 trucks, something like that?
Probably, yeah.
Got to look into it. So TMS being a similar thing where it's like, hey, we got away with it for a while, but now... Okay.
But now we may need it. So yeah, that's a big thing we're looking at. Another thing that we've been doing a little bit of, we actually have been doing this and a little bit want to do some more of is just kind of some of our own minor repairs rather than paying somebody else to do it, doing them ourselves.
Is that something that you and the other management guys have expertise in, or are you leaning on drivers to pick up?
It'd be us. Like we all have some decent mechanical aptitude. And so it'd be simple stuff like fixing an air leak or, replacing lights, simple stuff like that.
Okay. All right. You say simple. I look at those trucks and go, yeah, right. Okay. Yeah. Okay, good. I think that's just about the end of the list.
Yeah, it is, but there's also some other concepts that I want to talk about a little bit
sure.
that we want to do. So those are specific things, but some concepts we want to do a little bit better on too is this is something that I say on a pretty regular basis. To be a really good business owner and business operator, you've got to find some time to work on your business instead of always working in your business. And what I mean by that, I think I've talked about this before, but it's been a really long time, is when you're working in your business, you are, doing things like finding loads, you're taking care of the trucks, you're driving a truck, you're doing things that are specific to the operation of your business. When I talk about working on your business, I'm talking about doing things that are more strategic in nature and going to have a longer term impact. So
not the down in the trenches stuff.
So it might be, working on building a new relationship, or it might be something like, finding that making your business more efficient by evaluating a TMS,
right.
It's things like that. And so it can be really hard for business owners to kind of pause and not worry about the emergency that's happening right now, or
and
something that, hey, this
forward.
needs to be done, but look forward and spend a little bit of time. Even if it's 2 hours a month, you've got to, as a business owner, step away and take a little bit of time to work on the business and make the business better.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Let's see.
I know there's one more thing, but you kind of just have it in big, bold question marks. Like, this is not something I get to know yet.
No,
right?
you don't. Yeah. So there is one thing that I think is actually going to be a little bit of a bigger change. I'm not quite ready to announce it yet because there's still some pieces that need to fall into place before we can really make this happen. But there is a fairly big change that I think is going to be one of those things that has a little bit more of a bigger impact on our bottom line.
Right. I mean, I already know what it is. It's you're going with the sex appeal play, and putting me on the side of all the trailers. Right. Shirt off. Preferably. Yeah. No,
give me the picture.
I'll go for it,
You give
man.
me the picture, and I will put it on the truck.
It'll be shirt off, but from the neck up.
Blurred out. Nobody wants to see that.
No, nobody wants to see this. Okay, interesting. So we'll see what that is when you're ready to announce it. What do you think? A month, 2 months before we get to know what that is?
I hope it within the month.
Okay. All right. Very good. So final thoughts on what many littles make a muckle, Mickle? Little?
Many Mickle
little
make a Muckle.
Okay.
Many littles make a Muckle. So you can, any way you want to say it, it all kind of means the same thing. But, a thing that I want to, like a word of caution, maybe, I don't know exactly what to call this, but making little changes is hard because you make one little change, you're like, oh, this isn't going to make that much of a difference. And so it's hard to have the discipline to do that. And so what it really requires is some patience, some dedication, and willingness to be kind of deliberate about everything that you do. You've got to stick with it. And, it's not an easy process to make those little incremental changes. And because you have to do a lot of them. And you think, just one or two, it's not going to have that big of an impact. It's not going to make a difference. But if you can do 10 little things, those will all add up to be something significant.
I mean, it's a bit like this episode, really, where we've bounced around to so many different subjects that we've hit over the years. But today we did it in a very small fashion. Here's this tiny thing we're doing about fuel. Here's the thing about expenses. Here's the thing about tires, for heaven's sake, or whatever the case may be, the load analysis and all that. We hit all these different subjects, but we've dived into them before. And today it's just about, hey, what's the little thing we can do to take that subject, make it better for our business?
Yeah. Right? And you think about it, we've talked about a good, 10 plus things, probably 15. But some of them actually have multiple pieces that I would say each one of those is a little Mickle. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's like a good 20 little things here that I'm talking about that I think it's going to make a big difference over the next 3 to 6 months.
All right.
So all I can say at this point is I want everybody to kind of jump on this wagon with us, take the ride. Let's do this together. Let's all focus on some of those little things that we can do to have a big impact on our business.
And I did not mention this at the top of the episode, Chris. Obviously, Haulin Assets LLC, motorcarrierhq.com, all those things, places that we want people to go. But the Facebook page is actually becoming a great spot for things like this, where we do have some of you, and you know who you are, that comment regularly, and we love seeing you there. Let's exchange some ideas.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll hang out on Facebook together and bat around some ideas of what the little things are that you can find.
Yeah, I think that would be a great thing to do. I'd love to hear people's. I don't have a I don't have the market on all good ideas. So I'm sure there's other things out there that we can do that I'd love to hear people's suggestions, recommendations. That would be awesome. Also, speaking of Facebook, I did find this phrase, many a Mickle make a Muckle, with a Scottish accent.
Oh,
and
no.
sometime in the very near future, you're going to see it on Facebook. I'm going to share it on Facebook and let people listen to it.
I look forward
Since
to that.
you failed this so miserably and aren't doing it yourself.
Hey, if you could play it right now, I could mimic it, but I can't pull out a Scottish accent just from nowhere. So unfortunately, I can do a lot of others. That one has always escaped me. All right, Chris. So anything else, or I think we're pretty good to cut and run?
I actually have an impact tip.
What's your
It's
impact
been a while. Go find some Mickles.
So this whole episode is one giant impact tip.
It is one giant impact tip. Yeah.
Go find some Mickles.
Yep.
I love it. Okay. Yeah, that's right. We want to keep it to one sentence. So go find some Mickles, everybody. And of course, find us in all the places that I mentioned before. If you are so inclined, and you should be so inclined if you made it to the end of this episode, please leave us a review if you haven't done so yet. 5 stars, a nice little comment. They go a long way toward helping other people find the podcast. And of course, share us yourself as well with your friends, your coworkers, anybody who you think might enjoy this podcast. Chris, I will see you for some numbers in a couple weeks.
We'll see you then.
All right.
Thanks, Craig.
Oh, and I need to tell you about Randy Andy.
Randy Andy.
I met Randy Andy in Germany. That was his name.
Randy Andy.
You remind me next time. I'll tell you all about it.
Okay.
It'll be good.
All right.
It'll be good.
I'm excited.